The rain drummed against the windows of Whole Foods as I adjusted my designer coat and checked my Rolex. It was 8:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I was exhausted from another grueling day at my investment firm. All I wanted was to grab some organic salmon, a bottle of expensive wine, and retreat to my penthouse apartment overlooking the city skyline. My life was picture-perfect from the outside. Luxury car, designer clothes, a corner office on the 40th floor. But inside, I felt hollow. Success had come at a price, and somewhere along the way, I'd lost touch with what truly mattered. My relationships were superficial, my days mechanical, and my heart. Well, my heart felt like it was wrapped in expensive silk, but starving for genuine connection. As I wheeled my cart through the gleaming aisles, selecting items without really looking at prices, I noticed her, young woman, probably in her early 20s, standing in the produce section with a calculator in one hand and a crumpled piece of paper in the other. Her clothes were clean but worn, her shoes scuffed at the edges. She was carefully weighing apples, putting some back, then picking up bananas and repeating the same ritual. There was something about her concentration, her careful deliberation over every item that made me pause. In my world of instant purchases and unlimited credit cards, I'd forgotten what it felt like to count every dollar. I watched as she moved through the store with the precision of someone who knew exactly how much they had to spend and not a penny more. When I reached the checkout line, fate placed me directly behind her. Her cart was modest. Generic brand cereals, dialed bread from the discount rack, a small carton of milk, some pasta, and those carefully selected apples. As the cashier scanned each item, I could see her mentally calculating, her fingers tapping nervously against her purse. "That'll be $47.83, the cashier announced cheerfully. The young woman opened her wallet and counted out the bills slowly. $20, $30, $35. Her face grew pale as she realized she was short. She looked at her groceries, then back at her money, and I could see the exact moment her heart sank. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the cashier. "Could you please remove the apples, and maybe the milk too?" The line behind us was growing restless. People checked their phones, shifted their weight, and I could feel the collective impatience building. But all I could focus on was this young woman, standing there with such dignity, despite her embarrassment, trying to decide which necessities she could live without. In that moment, something shifted inside me. All the expensive therapy sessions, all the self-help books, all the meditation retreats, nothing had prepared me for this simple, profound moment of recognizing someone else's struggle. "Wait," I heard myself say, stepping forward. "I'd like to pay for her groceries." The young woman turned to look at me, her eyes wide with surprise. "Oh no, I couldn't possibly, please," I insisted, already pulling out my credit card. "It would be my honor." The cashier looked between us uncertainly, but I nodded firmly. Everything in her cart and put the apples and milk back on there too. As the transaction processed, I could see tears forming in the young woman's eyes. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't even know me." "Sometimes that's exactly when we need help the most," I replied, surprising myself with the wisdom in those words. After the groceries were bagged, she waited for me by the exit. "I'm Sarah," she said, extending her hand. "And I need you to know that this isn't just about the groceries." Today was really hard. We stood there in the fluorescent glow of the store's entrance, rain still pattering against the glass doors, and she told me her story. Sarah was a nursing student, working 2 part-time jobs to pay for school while taking care of her younger brother. After their parents died in a car accident 2 years ago, today she'd received an eviction notice. Tomorrow, she wasn't sure where they'd be sleeping. As I listened to her story, I realized something profound was happening. This glamorous life I'd built, the penthouse, the car, the clothes, suddenly felt meaningless compared to this moment of genuine human connection. Here was someone facing real challenges with grace and dignity, someone who was building a career in healing others despite her own pain, "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said, as we prepared to part ways. "Why did you help me, really?" I thought about it for a moment, rain creating patterns on the window behind us. I said slowly, because I needed help too. I just didn't realize what kind of help I needed. We exchanged numbers that night, and what happened next changed both our lives in ways neither of us could have imagined. Sarah called me 3 days later. She'd found a small apartment, but she needed help with the security deposit. Without hesitation, I helped her move in. But more than that, I discovered something I hadn't felt in years: purpose. I started volunteering at the nursing school's financial aid office, helping students navigate hardships. Sarah introduced me to her world: study groups in tiny apartments, potluck dinners where everyone contributed what they could. Friendships built on mutual support rather than mutual benefit. Through Sarah, I met Marcus, a veteran struggling with PTSD who was studying to become a counselor. I met Jennifer, a single mother pursuing her dream of becoming a teacher. I met Carlos, an immigrant working 3 jobs while getting his accounting degree. Each person had a story, a dream, and a determination that humbled me. 6 months later, I made a decision that shocked everyone in my social circle. I liquidated a significant portion of my investments to start a scholarship fund for students facing financial hardship. The Second Chances Foundation would provide not just money, but mentorship, support, and most importantly, hope. Sarah was our first recipient, and she graduated summa cum laude 18 months later. At her graduation, as I watched her walk across the stage in her cap and gown, I realized that the $47.83 I'd spent that rainy Tuesday night had been the best investment of my life. But the story doesn't end there. Last month, exactly 2 years after that night in the grocery store, I received an invitation. Sarah was getting married to a fellow nurse she'd met during her pediatric rotation. The wedding was simple but beautiful, held in a community garden with string lights and homemade decorations. As I sat in the front row, honored to be considered family, Sarah's brother, now a senior in high school and headed to college on an academic scholarship, stood up to give a toast. 2 years ago, he said, his voice strong and clear, a stranger paid for our groceries when we had nothing. He didn't know that Sarah had been crying herself to sleep every night, worried about how she'd feed me and keep us together. He didn't know that she'd been considering dropping out of nursing school to work full-time. He didn't know that one act of kindness would ripple out to touch dozens of other lives. He looked directly at me, and I felt tears streaming down my face. But here's what I think he did know: that sometimes the smallest gesture can change everything. Because of his kindness, Sarah became a nurse. Because Sarah became a nurse, she saved lives. Because she saved lives, those people went home to their families. The ripples just keep going. As the evening wound down, Sarah pulled me aside. "You know what's funny?" she said, her wedding dress glowing in the soft light. "I've been thinking about that night a lot lately. You said you needed help too, but you never told me what kind of help you needed." I looked around at the celebration, at the community of people who had become my chosen family, at the foundation recipients who were now mentoring other students, at the genuine joy and connection that filled the space, and I smiled. "I needed to remember what it felt like to be human," I said. "I needed to remember that true wealth isn't measured in what you can buy, but in what you can give. I needed to learn that the most glamorous life isn't the one that looks perfect from the outside, but the one that feels meaningful from the inside." Today, the Second Chances Foundation has helped over 200 students pursue their dreams. My penthouse is smaller now, my car less expensive, my clothes more practical, but my life is infinitely richer. And it all started with $47.83 worth of groceries on a rainy Tuesday night, when I learned that sometimes the most luxurious thing you can do is simply notice someone else's need and choose to meet it. The most beautiful designer dress you can wear is kindness. The most precious accessory you can carry is compassion. And the most glamorous life you can live is one that lifts others up. That grocery store receipt is framed on my office wall now, right next to photos of all our scholarship recipients at their graduations. It reminds me every day that the smallest acts of kindness can create the most beautiful transformations, not just for others, but for ourselves. Because sometimes, when you think you're saving someone else, you discover that you're actually saving yourself.